The views expressed on this program are those of the producers and individuals appearing on this program and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Sun Prairie Media Center staff, its video service providers, or the staff and elected officials of the City of Sun Prairie.
We're all familiar with the three whats: what it is, what it can do for me, and what does it cost. Tyler Rickenaugh, Country Financial, can help you find the answers with insurance coverage to help protect what's most important to you, all at a price you can afford. So while you're juggling work and kids while trying to keep an eye on your financial future, Tyler Rickenaugh, Country Financial, will make sure they are the first ones there when you need them most.
The kids are back to school, and your schedule is busier than ever. From daycare pickup, doctor's appointments, sports, and college tuition, a parent's signature is a powerful thing. Have you ever stopped to think, what would happen if you weren't able to provide one? With thoughtful estate planning, you can make sure that your child's health and education needs are met in the event of your absence due to a temporary incapacity or even death. The estate planning team at Hurley Burrish is here to help.
Fostering deeper relationships, influencing behavior change, developing resilience. You're about to start winning. Here is your host, Christine Bright.
Welcome to Parenting Game. I am so glad you are here. We have all gone through periods in our life where we feel we are surviving more than we are thriving. There's also been times where you're thriving in some areas, but not in others. My guest is Sam Feeney. He is the founder of the Career Factors, and he is going to give us some great advice on how we can go from surviving to thriving. Sam, thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thanks, Christine. It's great to be here.
So, we connected quite a while ago. I had the privilege of being on your podcast, and a lot has gone on since that time. But before we get into that, share with us a little bit about your family.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have 5 kids, ages 13 down to 4-year-old twins. And it's a wild ride, 4 boys and a girl, and just all involved in a bunch of different activities, and actually homeschool my oldest, who's wrapping up 7th grade right now.
Twins, 5 kids. Yeah, I bet there are times when you feel like you're surviving.
Yes. Well, how about when them surviving is a win?
Yeah.
Right? Like, okay, hey, we got to the end of the day. Everybody's still alive.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
We got all. I often kid families back when I was a nanny, so usually they had multiple children, and I would always tease and say, hey, if I come back with 50% of your kids at the end of the day, I call that a win.
That's right.
So share with us one thing. I always like to take this moment for my guests to be able to pat themselves on the back a little bit. Share with us one thing you have done well as a parent.
It really probably speaks to the last year and a half or so of my life. One of the reasons why I left a career in education and started out as an author and a consultant and a coach is because I wanted to change the lifestyle of my home life and be around for my kids more during the day. And so that was something that wasn't easy necessarily, but I saw where things were headed, especially with my oldest and trying to capture these last couple of years before he heads into high school. And so I really prioritized lifestyle much more than I usually do and made the change to create a more flexible schedule so I could be available. We're doing a field trip in an hour to go to a local aerospace museum, and otherwise I would have been at work. So trying to mix it up like that.
Oh, that is really good. And I know it's hard. You know, our careers can tend to be so much a part of our identity. So you willing to be able to shed that and prioritize the family, I'm gonna give you props on that. Good for you. So as I said, there was a lot that has happened since we last connected. You have 2 books, so please shamelessly plug those 2 books that you have.
Okay, so they're actually kind of related, which is fun. They don't seem like it on the face, but one of them is called Why Aren't You Thriving? And it's a book for men, but actually I've had a number of women who've read it and have really enjoyed it as well. But It's a compilation of 39 interviews I did on my podcast, where you were a guest as well, called Made to Thrive. And I wanted to figure out, I kind of try to crowdsource personal development and personal growth. So I interviewed 5 people in each of the 7 core areas of life, and I was asking them the same types of questions of, when weren't you thriving? How did you start thriving? What tools and resources did you use? Trying to give kind of an accessible tools for Titans, if you know that, by Tim Ferriss. And so one of those is career. And so right on the heels of that, these are both early 2023. Right on the heels of that, I wrote the Career Factors, which just came out. And the Career Factors is um, it's kind of what a redo or a reset that I experienced myself and have been able to coach others through. And I did that one in particular because I saw how much career affected my other areas of my life, including my parenting. And I really needed to address that. And I also saw a need for a lot of parents, as a school counselor, will come to me and say, "Where were you when I was going through high school? I needed help doing this as well." I'm not, me too. So I kind of wrote it for me back then. So now we're building that out and coaching into like grown-ups, adults, and then we have a student version as well to be able to help them choose careers and give them the tools to make great career decisions throughout their life.
Well, Will, quickly, I know that you have 3 types of categories that you are using the career factors in. So you do organizations, you also work within the schools, and then individuals. Briefly, I would like to have you just touch on what does it look like in the schools of how you're using the career factors?
Well, the schools one in particular is interesting because it's an area that for a long time did not have to deal with employee engagement and retention. It really was pretty understood. You showed up, you were there for the long haul, and were rewarded for it with a pension or whatever else might be. But post COVID in particular, schools have kind of realized the same types of pains that normal industries have, government and for profits, in the fact that they are losing teachers. And so I use the career factors as a model, and I work through employee engagement and retention. I'm actually go through and re-engage their hiring and an onboarding process too, because the whole message of career factors is that career satisfaction is an inside job. And so, but you need to figure out as an organization how to make that personal for each person. And so I work alongside teachers and then building administrators or building leaders, putting them more in a coaching role rather than I only hear from my boss when he tells me what to do or when I do it wrong. If you got this power imbalance, I try to make it more of a side by side and change that dynamic. And that's the same thing for corporations as well.
Oh, that is an excellent point. And if anything that COVID did for us, I believe it allowed the workforce to be much more open-minded than it ever has been. And this open-mindedness and being open to other ways of doing business isn't detrimental. It can be really,
Right,
really
absolutely.
good.
Yeah, sometimes forced change, we don't like the way it feels. But I was just recounting this to a group of people the other day. I was doing a workshop and I said, you don't think of yourself as flexible, but think about how much you've changed in the last 3 years, how much you endured. And then there are practices that you had to do during this forced period of change that you're keeping, which means you adapted. Great job. Like, give yourself some
Absolutely.
credit for that.
Absolutely. Yeah, we all need those pointers once in a while because, again, too, when you do feel like you're surviving something and you work through it, taking that time to go back and look back and see what was actually accomplished and
Yes.
achieved can be so helpful. And often we're so exhausted by the surviving, we don't do that look back. So it's really,
Right.
really important. Let's get into what you do with your coaching and with the individuals. As we mentioned, you saw that your career was definitely affecting your home life. We know that home life can affect how well you're doing at work. What tend to be some hurdles that are typical for people in their careers that you help them overcome?
Sure. There are a number of things that I think this book and then the coaching program takes a different approach to than what we grew up with. And so I think a lot of times we borrowed our career satisfaction metrics from our parents or from previous generations. And so it was only 2 generations ago where if you had a job, that meant you got to stay alive and stay warm, dry, and fed. And so as time has passed, we really thought, and we inherited from our parents largely, was this idea that, well, if I'm getting paid and I'm doing something that I'm at least competent at, I should probably be grateful. But that has not been the way in particular. And I mean, I'm 45, so it's not like I'm a millennial or these, even Gen Z or whatever. I mean, like as a Gen Xer, I still was facing this as I approached my early 40s. I'm like, there's exterior, I feel fine. I'm checking a bunch of boxes, but I realized there was so much more about that. That was internally, I was wanting something more from that. So one of the biggest things that the coaching program helps people understand is that each of us in our own way are looking for something from our career that we probably haven't defined before. And after you hit your 4th job and you have a choice, basically, is I'm gonna lower my expectation for what work is, or I need to do something about this. Like I can't be cranky all the time. I need to actually come up with a job description for my job, which sounds kind of meta, but that's kind of what we're looking to do.
So have you found it is not so much about the money that I make these days as about how satisfied I feel about the work that I'm doing?
Yes, absolutely. And if you actually look at the research, money is actually only a career dissatisfaction limiter. It does not provide satisfaction. It only will cap our dissatisfaction. And
Wow.
so when I talk to people who are working through the ranks of some pretty competitive and high paying jobs, the thing that we often talk about is, yes, this next job, somebody just showed up and they offered you 20% more, all this stuff. That's great. But eventually, as you move through your career, those pay raises kind of level out and you end up staying somewhere or getting stuck somewhere, as some people will say. You better be scratching those other internal itches at that job that you took for more money. Because where most people end up is the money's so good, they won't take the job that they actually want that gives them a 15% pay cut. Even though that would pay, they would get paid for it in the other areas of their life. So they make this catch-22 for themselves, unfortunately.
I like that term. I like how you just phrase that because I'm going to steal that, Sam. The
I didn't put
payoffs
it
in
on
the
the
rest
first
of our
two, and the
lives.
rest of it is yours.
We look at the paycheck and the money, and we don't often look that our job can pay off in other areas of our life as well. Very, very important. Definitely stealing that. Before we get into talking about strategies that you share with your clients, I do want to ask the question, what hurdles have you seen in families that cause them not to thrive?
Sure. I mean, a lot of it is going to be communication around work and the expectations for it and where work fits in the priority of the family's life and existence. I'm thinking about one couple in particular, the idea that they had the guy had one set of expectations for what the wife needed from him as far as it regarded provision, and the wife had a totally different set of expectations. And he's chasing, kind of trying to climb the corporate ladder to get more money, whatever. But that, of course, comes with a cost. He's taking time away. After a while, she gets real with him, like, I don't need all this stuff. Like, I need you to be around, because the more, again, when you say yes to something, you say no to something else. And when there's that trade-off there, there's a lack of communication about expectations of what role does work play in our lives as a family, as we're building this family unit. And so that's a big, I think probably a pressing conflict that most people just don't think to ask about or have that language for.
Yeah, having those conversations of what you really want. And and we know that always when in marriages and at work, it comes down to that communication piece.
Mhm.
And unmet expectations is, well, we just know it's the thing that is the biggest hurdle, is we're not
Yep.
communicating expectations and when they're unmet. So let's get into some tools and strategies. So when you have somebody coming to you and they're not satisfied in their career, and there's probably this mix of causing issues at home,
Right.
what are some of the strategies that you offer?
Well, when we look through, I mean, the book is a good intro for the some of those strategies. We don't really kind of dive in quite as deeply, but if you want kind of an overview, I walk a fictional character through this whole process. And in effect, it's somebody who you need to decide at the outset is this something that is worth changing for me? And so I have an assessment called the weight of work that people can take and just try to quantify how is this my current job situation affecting the rest of my life? Because that's something where if you think, hey, it's work, it's supposed to be lousy, like no big deal, then you're probably fine. But I think there are certain seasons for people when they need to recognize and name where it is. Because for me, coaching, the only thing I can't provide for a client or for an individual is the motivation. I need for them to know at the outset, what do you get if you can come home from work and feel physically tired, but filled up instead of used up because you were doing the things at work that made you come alive. And so what I tell my clients is I say, I'm going to help you improve your career satisfaction at your current job, or I'll help you find one where you will. And because it's such a pain in the rear to change jobs, most people don't want to.
Yeah.
And so what we start is identifying that goal, and then we start to really lean into. I have an assessment called the CF3. They take the assessment and they say, okay, I'm actually looking for, like, my number one is impact. So I'm looking for my job, I'm looking for impact, growth, and lifestyle. Okay, great. Now I'm going to help you use that lens and start to see, did you think you were there for something else and I need to change that paradigm? You thought that you were there for the money and you realize, man, if I'm here for the impact, I can actually go right now and I can start to see where there are opportunities for impact. I just forgot that that's what I liked, or I never was told that before. So I'm giving them a new lens to go see their current job and be able to work through and practice to really own these career motivators, because they need to make sense. There needs to be a passage from, you've taken assessment, great job. Now we're gonna internalize that, where you really own those, like, hey, that is me, and this is what it means for me. And so there's a lot of internal work, because you don't see with your eyes, you see with your mind, right? And so we're changing the way people are seeing their current jobs so they can really give a right assessment on, do I need to leave? And if I do need to leave, man, I don't want to make the same mistake that got me in this job. So I need to be prepared.
I'm glad that you point that out, because initially when we started talking, I'm sure some viewers go, ugh, this is all going to be about me having to leave my current job.
Right.
And you just said that's not the case. We lose our focus, or we realize that we're missing the opportunities that are already there. Do you often find, too, as you're coaching people, that we fall into the expectations of others, and I'm doing what I'm doing because I should be, because people say I'm good at this and people say I'm good at that? And I am, but it isn't necessarily what's fulfilling to me. Are these conversations you have as well?
Absolutely. And especially for the student coaching program, where we're really, instead of tearing up the foundation, we're just laying it right the first time. But we really have to go in and talk about, like, what career influences are coming from your family, from your school experience, from society, or kind of maybe the area where you grew up. Those things are very, they're not very obvious for the individual, but they're always there. At least one of them will be there. And so we'll talk about it in particular, because I need to know early on in an individual coaching program if there are sacred cows that I need to be aware of in this. And I can get you through the whole thing and and have that set. But then at the end of the day, you're like, hey, but guess what? Like, I still think this is what my dad, who's passed, who's like, there's so much this baggage that comes through. And so that's why, having been a counselor as well, it's kind of helpful to be able to say, maybe we just need to just stop and get real for a little bit. So I have fortunately, just from a lot of experience, a toolbox where we can kind of deal with whatever we need to deal with through the process. Because oftentimes, if you go back to why aren't you thriving, the metaphor I use for the 7 core areas of our life, career is just one of the fruits. It's one of the external things, but our identity is one of the roots. And so sometimes we need to get into that. We don't always have to, but if we need to, I'm ready.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think about with my own career of the influence of, offhanded remarks that I heard from my dad growing up really limited me. And we often don't realize how much of a hold they have on us and keeping us back. And I really like that that's part of the process that you go through with people, because that is so liberating.
Yeah, and it's designed to be, and I think I love this for parents. Is I have a kind of a mini course, but it's called "You Are a Career Coach," and it's for parents to talk about, if you've got this lens on to see things in your kid, it can be something that enhances. But as you've noted as well, the other side of it is it can be a great limiter. There's a lot of research about family expectations, and in particular, middle school boys. There's something like 50% of careers they've eliminated as good for them, whatever the heck that means, by the time they're 14, because of the family influence. And so I think, in particular, parenting and careers are so enmeshed, because we model for our kids our attitudes about work. We model for our kids our messages about work. And nothing for me is more deflating than a parent who hates his or her job, comes home, even if they're not complaining to the kid, but they're hearing it, right? Kids are pretty savvy.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. And but we're going to then tell them to take the same path we did. So unfortunately, what I've observed, and this is one of the reasons why I made a dramatic change about 2 years ago, is because I knew that I wanted to sustain credibility with my kid as long as possible. That's my goal. And so I couldn't say to him, hey, do this, this, and this. P.S. I don't love my job. Because where's my credibility?
Yes.
And then where it's like when you finally tell your kid Santa Claus doesn't exist, he's like, well, what else have you been lying to me about? I did not want to be in that spot where I wasn't living the thing I was telling him to live. And that's a lot of times what shows up in our careers, unfortunately.
Yeah, it does. Well, I'm going to kind of take us segue, because you mentioned, we have a few minutes here left, this book for parents to be able to be like a career coach to their kids. And that really caught my attention, because I often tell parents, you don't have to be a therapist to be therapeutic to your kids. And you don't have to be a certified coach to be a career coach to your kids. Share a little bit about that resource for parents.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, You Are a Career Coach is for parents, and it's really just a short video series that's available. When you go to the Career Factors for Students, you can see that on there. I'm all about empowering people, and so it doesn't necessarily have to be that I'm doing the thing. Like if you can take this with your kid, usually, as you know, in working with families, sometimes you're more effective because you don't share DNA with the kid.
Yes.
And so, somehow you're able to communicate things differently. But I love empowering parents. And so the Career Factors for Students book and coaching process is directed to kids. But then there's, on that site is You Are a Career Coach, it's just a 25-minute or so training. And it's just, they can be encouraged by, hey, if I start to, I have a really good friend named Mitch. He talks about this idea of take off for a little bit, take off the parenting hat and put on the coaching hat, and you'll start to see things differently, right? And so if I think of myself as a career coach, I'll start to maybe identify and point out a name for my kid. Here's some things that maybe might be interesting to you. And if you use it in the Career Factors model, I'm looking for things that motivate kids in their career, not necessarily aptitudes. because I can have an aptitude at something and not necessarily love it. I can love something and muscle my way into aptitude because because it makes me come alive. And that's the difference that, that's where we go beyond what most people's normal career development is, hey, you're good at math, you should be an engineer. Okay, great. What if I'm not good at math? Like, everything else is on the table, but instead there's these other things that light kids up. And if we can be on the lookout for that, that's what really helps us be more effective. And again, think about that same power dynamic we talked about before. Eventually, you're going to go from this parent-kid dynamic to a side-by-side guide, coach, friend as your kid ages. You want to be able to bring something to the table. And especially if you can say, hey, I've seen these things in you. I'm now kind of trying to mentor and bring them out in you.
And one of the things parents have to realize too, which I think we get caught up in, is that our kids' choices, we feel, affect our identity. And that is a really hard realization to break, that their choices are their choices. It's not a reflection on my identity. And my son now is 29, has a great military career, talking about doing some other things. I mean, this kid is going to be able to retire at 43 from the military and have a whole new life. And one of the things, if I can give myself a little pat on the back, is I did realize early on how I was projecting some of my expectations on him, and stopped and started having conversations. And it is so cool now to sit down with that kid and brainstorm and hear what he's thinking and seeing the path. And I really am going to be pumping out this resource to parents, because I think the struggle becomes is, how do I start those conversations and what do they look like?
Right.
And this will be a great resource for them to have that framework.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Christine. That's why we do, in the Career Factors for Students coaching program, at the end of each session, we email the parent the activity as well, not for homework, like not so you can make sure your kid's doing this, so you can do it with your kid, because we want to give you fodder for conversations.
Yeah, that is so great. Oh, Sam, this was so helpful. We could talk even longer, but we are out of time. Please share your website.
Absolutely. Yeah. thecareerfactors.com will get you every rabbit trail you need to get to. And you can also shoot me an email, just sam@thecareerfactors.com. If I can help at all, I'd love to be able to provide insights and resources, just like you're doing with a parenting game, Christine.
Oh, well, thank you so much for being my guest. And thank you for tuning into The Parenting Game.
We're all familiar with the 3 whats: what it is, what it can do for me, and what does it cost. Tyler Rickenaugh, Country Financial, can help you find the answers with insurance coverage to help protect what's most important to you, all at a price you can afford. So while you're juggling work and kids while trying to keep an eye on your financial future, Tyler Rickenaugh, Country Financial, will make sure they are the first ones there when you need them most. The kids are back to school, and your schedule is busier than ever. From daycare pickup, doctor's appointments, sports, and college tuition, a parent's signature is a powerful thing. Have you ever stopped to think, what would happen if you weren't able to provide one? With thoughtful estate planning, you can make sure that your child's health and education needs are met in the event of your absence due to a temporary incapacity or even death. The estate planning team at Hurley Burrish is here to help.
Thank you for watching The Parenting Game. All episodes of The Parenting Game are available on demand at sunprairiemediacenter.com.